I have my daughters pick her up. So I just picked them up, and then I just screamed even louder. So I was sleeping out all bed, now she's screaming louder because I got off and she thought it was going to come all the time. So I got him back up again, and I just flung him into the woods, and he's still away. I know, I said, just give him.
Welcome to the Summerville Museum and Research Center. We're glad you're here and glad you are helping us out. Today we got a speaker, Mr. Thomas Dion. He's a true Summervillian, born here in Summerville, born and raised. He's a Citadel graduate, served in the United States Navy. He went back to the Citadel as a professor of civil engineering and retired there after 38 years. He's also a trustee of the Dorchester Free School Board, and he's also an author. He's written this book, The Tea Farm, and they're available at the Timrod Library if you'd like to purchase one. Mr. Dion.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I'll try to do that introduction some justice here. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon for a few minutes. And of course, Danny neglected to tell you that he and Ed had me working on another project for them. So I had to break away from that in order to get here to try to take care of my obligations with them, because back in January they said, would you like to talk? And January sounded pretty good back then, so here we are all of a sudden. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. What I want to do is spend a few minutes talking about the tea farm. My mother's family had owned a tea farm for many years, and so I lived at the tea farm for a while, short while, and it was a wonderful place. It had all the elements that Dr. Shepherd had when I knew it, and the beautiful gardens, all intact. The neighborhood where there were various families living out there in the buildings, most of them had a rental arrangement with the tea farm owners while they were either building a house or moving to another place that was out of the area. So we had a lot of different families come and go through the tea farm over the years. This book is available at the Timrod Library. No one was paid anything to put it together. All the proceeds basically go to the Timrod to help the Timrod with this mission. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. So you ask, why did we write this book now? All of a sudden, here it is. Why would we want to put this together? Well, I had received a phone call from this young lady right here, Lisa Tyler. She's from Jacksonville, Florida, and she works for the Department of Agriculture for the state of Florida. And she's a plant enthusiast, and she was doing research on azaleas. And she said that she traced the origins of most of the azaleas in the state of Florida to Summerville. And she said, and in fact, most of them came from the tea farm. And she asked me, she said, well, what do you know about the tea farm? I said, well, I know a little bit about it. I said, my mother's family had owned it for a while. And so she was asking me if I had any information, and so I got something together and sent it to her, and she said, have you ever seen a map of the tea farm? And I said, no. I said, I never have, come to think of it. Because the tea farm was over 600 acres when it was in operation, huge. And so I put my surveyor's hat on, went up to St. George and got some deeds and some plats and put together a sketch of what the tea farm looked like and sent it to her, and she was happy with that. And by the time I did all that, Bill Walker and Walter Bailey, who also worked on this book project with me, and I want to give them credit for their help in getting this all put together. We were working on another history book prior to this on the Dorchester Free School Board. And so we were already busy in networking and whatnot. So I asked Bill and Walter, I said, do you think there's enough material here for us to do another book project on the tea farm? Because I had over 100 pages of reference material by that time. And they said, sure, let's go ahead and do that. Well, we started working on it. This is what came about. So the person who actually made the connection between Summerville and Jacksonville was Dr. Harold Hume, if I can get this to work, who was then the president of Glen St. Mary Nursery in Jacksonville. And so he got a lease from the Buswells, and we'll talk about the Buswells in a minute, to come up to Summerville and get cuttings and raftings and whatnot of various plants, and he took them back down to Glen St. Mary Nursery, and from there he propagated all the cultivars that were then distributed and sold throughout the state of Florida. So he was the gentleman that actually made it happen. He ended up being the president of the University of Florida later in his career. And so out of all this, you might ask, well, what did Lisa Tyler find out about Summerville that might interest you? And what she found out in her investigations was that the pride of Summerville, which everybody talks about in Azalea Park, was actually cultivated by Judge B.C. Presley. Judge Presley lived on Central Avenue, right by Short Central, and owned all the land down Central Avenue in front of the Lutheran Church, the same land that the Timrod Library is located on, across 3rd South Street, all the way down to Pike Cove, and in fact, there's a little lane there called Presley Avenue that's now part of the town's street system there today. But he's the one that came up with this. So George Singleton and Hugo Jantz promulgated this cultivar and created over 30,000 plants that they donated to the town when they created Azalea Park. So he's actually the originator of the pride of Summerville. So we talk a little bit about tea being the main theme. Here's a little timeline that I'd like to just hit a couple of highlights. One is in 1647, Peter Stuyvesant first introduced tea to North America in Staten Island. And I always, you know, the town of Somerville, we talk about the birthplace of sweet tea. I always got to say that Peter Stuyvesant was known to put a little bit of honey in his tea to sweeten it. So we'll talk about that later. So it might be a little bit hard for the town to claim the birthplace of sweet tea when something like that was going on back in 1647. The next one I'd like to mention is 1795, when Andre Michaud and his son came to the area and were credited with bringing the first tea plants to South Carolina. 1880, we'll jump down here, William DeLuck, he was the U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary, was interested in seeing if there was a market for growing and cultivating tea in South Carolina. So he leased part of Newington Plantation for a 20-year lease to see if they could grow tea. And after 7 years, they gave it up because they blamed it on different things, weather, mismanagement, whatnot. But the following year, in 1888, that's when Dr. Shepherd decided he was going to give a shot at it, and he, we'll talk about him in just a minute. But anyway, that's when he bought the first parcel of land, also part of Newington Plantation, but a different area, and started his activities with growing tea. He died in 1915. In 1919, the tea farm was bought by the Buswell family from Hackensack, New Jersey, and they owned it until 1955, when they sold the property, the remaining property is about 70 acres, to Harold Sebring, who subdivided the property into lots, which is out there, what you see out there today when you drive around. And then I hate to tell you, but in 2018, Dr. Shepherd's home was brought down. So that's kind of a nutshell. The Michaud's, who came and were credited with bringing the first tea plants to the area, were actually two of them, Andre and his son, Francois Andre Michaud. Now you see a lot of these pictures around, it just says Andre Michaud, but that is the son of the gentleman that was chartered by the King of France to do a survey of North America on different types of vegetation, foliage, different types of raw materials and supplies that could possibly be used by the French government to help the population over there. Give you an example, back in those days they built sailing ships out of oak timbers, and one of the things that they found, if they could find an oak tree that had the right curvature of the branches, which we call a natural curved timber, you can cut the branch off and then take the bark off and shape it a little bit, and it would already have the shape of the rib for that part, and the ship, natural bend, it was the strongest type of timber that you could use. So they were looking for these types of things, and also new food supplies and whatnot. So when they arrived up north and actually had a place with an orchard in Hackensack, New Jersey. Just so happens to be the same place that the Boswell was from, where they tried to grow different fruits and whatnot, with the pears and apples and all, but they found that the climate was a little harsh, so they moved south, and that's why they ended up and had their own place where we now know is Michaud Boulevard, close to, excuse me, the airport and the area over there by Boeing. So the man that I attribute to be the best ambassador Summerville ever had was Dr. R.M.C. Page, who was from practice medicine in New York City. He was a pulmonary specialist, and they had a nationwide, or actually a worldwide conference in Paris in 1888, where all the physicians got together to discuss a strategy on attacking tuberculosis, where it came from and how to treat it and whatnot. He got up in the pulpit in front of the whole world in Paris and proclaimed that Summerville was one of the two best places in the world to live because of the environment, the atmosphere, the pine tree laden air, and also the high elevation that the area has. So when he did that, all of a sudden Summerville was on the map. Everybody wanted to come to Summerville, mostly invalids though, but they still wanted to come. And so this brought about what we call Summerville's golden age, and this was a result of Dr. Page making that proclamation in Paris. And what are some of the things that transpired from the fact that people were wanting to flock to Summerville to be in the best place in the world? Well, Dr. Shepherd started the tea picker school that helped educate the local children and gave them money in their pockets where they could buy things that otherwise they didn't have money for, like clothes and things of that nature. Excuse me?
Pokemon cards.
Okay. Let me invite everybody to stop me anytime you want to and poke me on if you want to. Okay. Also, the new town hall was built right down where the brick one is now, down the street in 1892 on Main Street. The St. Barnabas Mission, which is over here by where the Bank of America is, it was started through St. Paul's Church and Dr. Shepherd, and also Dr. Prelude. We also had the formation of Dorchester County, 1897. Before that, we had one foot in Carlton County and the other foot in Berkeley County. Another one was a group of women got together. They started the Chinagua Literary Circle. So it was interested people learning literature and these types of things. And that's what was the predicate to the Timrod Library being formed at that time. The A.B. Lee Infirmary was opened up during that period of time, which took care of people in need. And a new graded school was built on Laurel Street, which is now the playground on Laurel Street when you ride by there. And just a number of things, but all of this was driven because people wanted to come to town. The streets had to be improved. More houses were being built. They started lighting the streets at night with lanterns, and you know, it was coming out of just being a village into a small town, basically, being more urbanized, if you will.
Can I ask real quick, where
Yeah.
were most of these people moving from?
Well, most of them were just here to visit for the wintertime, basically, and they were from all over New York, Massachusetts, all over St. Louis. Ultimately, they came from mostly from the north and middle west over here. A few of them came from California over the years. Now I'm talking about this other project that we're working on, which has to do with the inns of Summerville. All of the inns that were here and where the clientele came from were from those locales.
So we were the new Florida.
Pardon?
We were the new Florida at the time.
We were new until the land bust in Florida. All the land sharks down there started to open up, and people bypassed Somerville and went down to Florida. So, yeah.
So I'm backing up, but you said one of the two best places. What was the other best place?
Thomasville, Georgia.
Thomasville, Georgia.
I thought you'd ask that. Okay, so talk about Dr. Shepherd. There were actually two Dr. Shepherds. Dr. Shepherd the senior and Dr. Shepherd the junior. Dr. Shepherd the junior was our Dr. Shepherd. Dr. Shepherd the senior was a professor at Amherst College. He got a teaching position at the South Carolina Medical School in Charleston, and he would teach down here in Charleston for a period of time during the year, and he would go back north and teach at Amherst. So he was kind of holding two positions for a long time, teaching in these two different academic institutions. Well, when he retired, his son, Dr. Charles Shepherd Jr., took his position in Charleston on the medical school faculty. And he taught there for probably about 10 years. And he was interested in plants, he was interested in chemistry. And so after 10 years, he decided, you know, I want to change the venue. So he stepped down from his teaching position, and this was in 1887 when the federal government closed down their efforts to grow tea in Somerville. And he decided, well, I'm gonna go try to do that. So he stepped down. In 1888, he bought his first piece of property right outside of town limits and started his business. So here's the map that I gave Lisa Tyler showing the tea farm, and I'll just walk you through it. This right here is Main Street. Here's 5 Points right here. Main Street makes that hard 90-degree bend and it heads out towards Walterboro. So this right in here is Marion Avenue up in here. Halcyon subdivision, Halcyon Inn is over here. The tea farm extended all the way down. This is, I guess, Old Gulf Road. I forgot the name of it. But extended all the way down where Stephen Chellis lived right here, if you know Stephen. but it ran straight on out and then came down towards Bacon's Bridge. So Bacon's Bridge Road is over here. Okay, so it extended all the way to Bacon's Bridge Road, and this is actually Luton Drive is one piece of property over. So it was 600 acres total in there. What I knew when I was growing up was this crosshatched area right here, which is about 70 acres. That part remained in the Buzzell family for all those years, and that was the area that was sold to Harold Sebring that was subdivided. So the part that you see in lots is this crosshatched area here. But it went, the property went all the way down. This is now the golf course, Summerville Golf Course. Went across the Sawmill Branch, and like I said, all the way over to Basin Bridge Road. So it was huge. We're gonna talk about this neighborhood here in a minute. People that joined the tea farm and their connections with Dr. Shepherd. So we got a few slides here, some of the buildings that are still here today from the tea farm, and some that aren't really. This is the Tea Picker School. It's still here today on 108 Old Country Club Road, but you wouldn't recognize it because it's been renovated several times, and you'd have to look hard to see that gable, but it's there. Next to it, where Dr. Bill Lomax lives on the corner, that was the tea farm manager's residence. This right here is the gatehouse, which if you pull into the tea farm today off of Main Street and you go in Tea Farm Road, when you drive down a little ways, there's two white posts on either side of the road, and that was actually the main entrance to the tea farm for all the years. And just to the left, right there where that white post is on the left, set back a little bit. It used to be grown up and you couldn't even see it, but recently somebody cleaned it out so you can see it. But this was what they called a gatehouse. Ed Brailsford and Carolyn Brailsford lived there for years. It's still there. It's been bricked up. It was wooden in the day. This one is right down the street, a little ways on the left-hand side when you hit Walker Drive and Tea Farm Road. This was the Jardinier. This is where the gardener lived. They're in that corner house right there. I think that house just sold for like $600,000. Unbelievable. I didn't know. I didn't know it was going. I used to live in that house. It looked like a $600,000 house back then. This one is, if you take a right there at Tea Farm Road and West Walker and start heading west. This house is right on the left-hand side on the corner. This is where Sonny Wearing lived for many years. But this was before the renovations were in place, which you can see today. It doesn't look like this. Again, so many changes, but that's the way it was back in the day. Let's see if we can get the next one. All right, this was Dr. Shepherd's home, right down the street a little bit on the left-hand side. It was recently torn down, but it was a wonderful place, a great place. I was just a young kid. We'd play all over, play inside there. It was a fun place to be in. Right down the street a little bit further, on the same side as Dr. Shepherd's home, was the manufacturing facility for processing tea and packaging tea. They had a water tower, part of the process right here. This is from the side of Sawmill Branch looking up to the back side of the processing place. You can see the tea plants coming right up to the back side of it. So the Sawmill Branch would be here, and they ran tea all the way up to the back of it. There was a fire that started New Year's Eve 1919 that was down the Sawmill Branch, and the wind blew it up the bank all the way up here, and this burned down. So 1919 was 4 years after Dr. Shepherd had passed away. And so all of his machinery that he had, there weren't any records of what he had created and whatnot, was all burned up. And actually, the Buswells had purchased the property about 4 days, signed the deed 4 days before this happened. So that killed any effort that they may have had to, continue some type of cultivation and processing, because everything basically got burned up. They said in the newspaper that the flames from this were over 200 feet in the air, burning up the tops of the longleaf pines, and they fought the fire. It actually saved Dr. Shepherd's house, which was close to it, and amazing that it did stand.
What's the address of Dr. Shepherd's old house?
I think it's one, oh, well, I don't know.
What
I can
street is
look-
it on?
Pardon?
What street?
It's on West Walker.
Okay.
West Walker. This is the barn that was down a little bit further past Dr. Shepherd's house. Here's a picture, a painting of what it looked like when I remember, except it was a cupola on top. I guess Mr. Sebring had taken the cupola off by then. But the way it looks today is this, it's been all bricked over, and you can see the front gable right here is still right there. And this used to be called the Bragg House. Jim Bragg lived in that for years, and now Holly Hussey and Chip Hussey lived there. It's down at the end of West Walker. So Dr. Shepherd had some good success with his efforts to plant the tea, and over the years he refined his methods of pruning and cultivation and fertilizer and whatnot. That was his key for being down at the medical university. He was interested in fertilizing plants and whatnot, and phosphate minerals that were mined and used for fertilizer production. So he applied all that science to his own project here, and he got to the point where he was looking for new markets to sell his finished product. So he saw there was going to be a World's Fair, if you will, held in Atlanta in 1895. He decided he would enter an exhibit of Pinehurst tea in that exposition, and took tea plants over there and whatnot, and came up with a second place silver medal for his activities there. Everybody was enthusiastic about how the tea tasted, and so he came back to Summerville, and he was pumped up about his success and wanting to help the Summerville area grow the tea production, because there was a demand out there now, and also looking for ways to improve the financial stability of the Low Country. And so he, I'll tell you about that in a minute, but some of his artifacts and whatnot that we were able to keep are here in the museum, in case you haven't seen them. They're in several display cases, but they had a tea caddy right here that's used to store tea. This is one of Dr. Shepherd's mantel clocks, dinner bell, chafing dish. It's amazing that thing survived, because we used to play with that thing. It's amazing it didn't get dented up. At least I'm not going to admit to it. And a tea scale right here. But they've got a wonderful display here of Dr. Shepherd's holdings, and they've added to it recently also. But Dr. Shepherd came back after 1895, and he started talking to his neighbors. Well, one of his neighbors was Captain F.W. Wagner, who owned the Pine Forest Inn. Another one was James Morris Signius, who owned a property over there between Tupper Lane and Marion Avenue. That's Marion Avenue coming in here. So we also had Henry Card, but Henry was involved with some other things, not what I'm gonna talk about right now. But Dr. Shepherd was a neighbor of these gentlemen right here, and there was another one, James Averill, I'm going the wrong way, who was the intendant, which was the name for the mayor, John Henry Averill. He was the mayor of Summerville back in that time period. He knew all these gentlemen. He was also the head of the South Carolina Railroad. When he took over the operation of the South Carolina Railroad, the headquarters was in Charleston. And one of the first things he did was to build a little office right up there on the intersection of Hickory Street and Railroad Avenue, called it West End, and he moved his office to Summerville. And he later was elected mayor, and as mayor, he was involved with improving the drainage systems in Summerville. He was also involved with improving the road system, because we're talking about 1902. This is that influx time of people wanting to come to Summerville. So basically, he was in charge of a lot of the engineering projects that took place during that period of time. Frederick Wagner, president of the Pine Forest Inn, his main interest in life was wholesale grocery business. And he was interested in new products. He was interested in finding new avenues to sell his products. He was interested in transporting these products, the raw materials, and also the finished goods. So he had an interest in both financial activities and in transportation. James Morris Signius was the president of the Charleston Cotton Exchange. And he was interested in getting cotton from the locale into the manufacturing plants to get the finished material woven and distributed. So he had an interest in trying to improve the economics of the area and also transportation. Dr. Shepherd, you already know, he has an interest in finding new revenue positions where he could increase his sales, and also using transportation. So, of course, he was involved with transportation. So these people all knew each other, and they got together in Summerville, and they thought, well, maybe what we ought to do is do something like Atlanta did. And these were the gentlemen who were the crucible of coming up with, I think, the South Carolina Interstate West Indian Exposition, which again was like a World's Fair held in Charleston in 1902. And you're familiar with where it was held because it was Hampton Park, basically. That right there is the lake in Hampton Park. So if you go to Charleston today and ride down Rutledge Avenue and look out to the right, as you go down Rutledge, you'll see a little sign that says Wagner Terrace. Well, Mr. Wagner owned all that land in there, all the way over to Lowndes Grove Plantation, and he donated that land for the exposition. So it's amazing that we have people, neighbors in Summerville, that actually were involved with that finished product. So you say, well, what was the involvement? Well, Mr. Averill, he ended up being in charge of the whole thing. He was the director general. Frederick Wagner ended up being the president of the exposition, and James Morris Signius ended up being the comptroller, taking care of all the money, and Dr. Shepherd ended up having his own private exposition in Summerville, where anybody who wanted to come to Summerville and see the tea farm and how it operated and drink some tea and whatnot, they had dedicated trains from Charleston to Summerville and back just for his own personal exhibit. So all of these people were involved, and one way or the other, the town of Summerville was very much involved with that 1902 exposition. Out of all of this activity, lots of famous people came to Summerville. One of them you might recognize was Elmore Mead. There's a lake out there at Hoover Dam called Lake Mead. It almost dried up a couple of years ago. But this is the same lake. Lake Mead was designed and built Elmore Mead when he was head of the Department of the Interior for the United States. He came to Summerville specifically to look at an irrigation system that Dr. Shepherd had created down on Sawmill Branch, and that's why he came here. But there are lots of other people that came over the years. We'll talk about some more in a minute. This was the Buzzell family that bought the tea farm in 1919. So the purchaser was Frederick Buzzell. He was the president of the home insurance company in New York City, and he had a son, Harry, who had pulmonary problems. So they sent Harry to Somerville to stay at a boarding house during the wintertime for his health, and he sent along with him his sister, Margaret Buzzell, to accompany him. And this was their mother right there, Eleanor Buzzell, and they had two brothers. There was Robert Buzzell and Frederick Buzzell. But because of Harry coming to Somerville and met Margaret here in Somerville, that's why I'm here. So Lawrence used to go visit his mother and met Margaret there, and one thing led to another. Got married and lived their adult lives here in Summerville. Margaret was very active in Girl Scouts, Timrod Library, and the Summerville Infirmary. Lawrence was involved with this building right here. He was interested in town council, and he was one of the first water commissioners where they put in the water system and the sewer system in the town. And he was also chairman of the Timrod's building committee and loved disease and convenience. So he was really the local contact for the Buzzell people as far as the tea farm went, because he was here in Somerville and kept an eye on it and took care of the local business for them. So Lawrence worked closely with Mayor Range S. Cuthbert, and I love this picture because you're not going to see many pictures of Mayor Cuthbert, but the two of them worked to help beautify the town, and one of the things that they worked on together was Azalea Park, and I know you've seen that picture somewhere, but what's amazing about this picture, it tells the story, because this right here is Main Street, and Azalea Park is on the left and on the right. And this is, we took about 1935, over 700 people visited just the tea farm to look at all the plants that Dr. Shepherd had arranged out there when he was alive. The tea farm had over 200 varieties of roses, not 200 rose bushes, 200 varieties of roses. They had thousands of azaleas, thousands of camellias, lots of different flowering plants, Japanese quince, all kinds of different plants that were out there. And Lawrence Walker, I just mentioned, loved plants, so that was one of his hobbies, was to help keep that running, that part of it running in good shape over the years. But let me ask you a question. How long has it been since 700 people have gotten in their car and driven from wherever they were to the tea farm to look at what was out there? It's been a long time. It was a magnet. We've lost that magnetism. Next year, 1936, over 6,000 people came through the town to look at all the flowers, which would included the Pine Forest Inn, Azalea Park, and the tea farm. 6,000 people in one day. 10,000 people came through on 1937, the following year. it's amazing the people that came here just to see the town. Well, that's why they named it the Flower Town in the Pines. Because it was, they said it was heaven on earth. The scents, all of the fragrances and the beauty, the wisteria, don't let me forget that. We used to fight the wisteria in our yard though, because it took over, but it was something to be beheld. So lots of people came to Summerville. Here are some notable people we might talk about. One of them was Nellie Day. Nellie Day was an entrepreneur. She was from Springfield, Massachusetts, and she used to make ladies' novelties, which would be like dressing table mirrors, ladies' purses, different types of stationery for high-class ladies like the Vanderbilts and Astors and all. So her clientele was very well off. Well, she would spend some time at the Pine Forest Inn. She loved Summerville. So she ended up buying a house, which you all probably know, is across the street from the Presbyterian Church on Central Avenue that Mike Rose and Vivian Rose live in. And that was her home for many years. And she was a saleswoman. So she had a small building erected in the backyard there, and she used to go to the Pine Forest Inn and collect up some visitors over there and bring them to her backyard into her little gazebo, which just happens to be on the other side of this podium right here. Dr. West was instrumental in getting that moved from where it originated over on Central Avenue to have it over here to be preserved forever. And she used to have tea back there and break out her novelties and make her sales and whatnot. And she did that for years. Her son, J. Gould Day, you can tell he's kind of a social fellow right there. I guess today we had to classify him, we call him a playboy. But he,
Is that his mama right beside
that's
him?
his mother, yeah.
Well, that takes some nerve.
Well, that's his wife.
Countess, though.
That's his wife, and we're pretty sure that's his sister-in-law, so,
Oh, wow.
you know, he had his latitude, okay? But, J. Gould Day was quite a horseman, and he used to come down and visit his mother. He and his wife, Gertrude Day, they spent a lot of time at the tea farm, actually rented a house there for a long time. And so that was their local home when they would come to the Summerville area. She is the daughter of the Bucknell that created Bucknell University. So she had plenty of money, and she was a socialite also. And this, we're pretty sure, is her sister, Marguerite Piccone, visiting in Somerville. And so they were well connected all throughout the United States socially. And they had friends that would come to Somerville and stay at the tea farm and visit and whatnot. So that was one of the couples that really ruled the social scene in Somerville for a long time. We also had Baroness de Graffenried, who owned property adjoining the tea farm. Her home was at the end of Linwood Lane and Salisbury Drive. It's that white house that was recently renovated and painted on the outside. She owned that for many years. This is her daughter. So she was involved with the tea farm because she was she owned land adjoining. She was a neighbor. This is her daughter, Gertrude McCulloch. Gertrude, she was a descendant of the Hamilton Duel. I forgot right now. What was that duel? Burr, it wasn't Burr.
Aaron Burr.
Burr. The Hamilton Duel. Aaron Burr, okay, yeah, so that was, I think that was part of her ancestry. And she was the daughter of Baroness Graffenried. And this right here is Muriel Vanderbilt, who is a friend of these people. All these people spent time at the tea farm. And we know about it because back in the old days, the newspapers used to run a column that said social activities. And so they'd write up about all the people in town and what they were doing and giving teas or luncheons and all that kind of stuff. And that's how we know that the Vanderbilts spent time in Summerville and the Hamiltons and many other people. Other persons that were involved with the tea farm included Bernard Kendrick. Bernard Kendrick was a mystery writer, and he lived at the tea farm for a number of years back in the late 40s, 1940s. During World War I, he served in Europe, and after the war he went to Great Britain and was in a hospital there for wounded soldiers. And there was one that had been blinded. So they started talking, and the soldier called him up to the bed, and they were chatting, and the soldier started feeling his uniform and whatnot. Make a long story short, after a few minutes, that soldier knew all about Bernard Kendrick. And Bernard looked at him and said, "I cannot believe that you know that much about me, and you can't even see me." And at that moment, he got enthralled with blind people and their ability to deduce and reason and whatnot. And so he spent his writing career writing mystery novels about blind detectives. And one of his characters was a fellow named Longstreet. Now, some of y'all might remember growing up in the 50s, TV series was called Longstreet. And if you haven't, you can go on YouTube and look up Longstreet, and they've got those TV episodes on there. You can go look. If you look at one of them, you'd be amazed at how he's got his character solving problems, mystery problems, murders, and all kind of stuff that you can't even see. It's amazing. So he wrote this novel right here, The Flames of Time, while he was living in Summerville in 1948. So he was kind of our resident mystery writer for many years here in Summerville. So this is what the tea farm looked like when I was growing up. About 70 acres in here. This is Main Street coming down right here. Marion Avenue comes in right here. This is now Tea Farm Road. They used to call it Concord Street. But this is where the gate house was located right here. Le Jardinier house was right here. This was where, excuse me.
That was the guy beside Shepherd. That was the guy beside Shepherd. Yeah.
Now this house, the house right here, the Tea Olive
Yeah.
Cottage isn't there. Should be right there. Or maybe that's supposed to represent, but Dr. Shepherd's
Yeah,
home
there it is,
would have
yeah.
been here, and the manufacturing place that got burned down was here, and the barn was down here at the end. So if you kind of drive through West Walker, you end up down at that point right there. But that's the area that was later subdivided by Mr. Sebring. So you say, what happened to all the plants and whatnot that were out there? Well, the Lipton Tea Company got interested in trying to take some of the tea plants and see what they could do with it back in 1956, 57. And the long story short, it ended up down on Walmala Island at the Charleston Tea Plantation. They call it the Charleston Tea Garden today. But what was interesting about that is that a Somerville resident, Mac Fleming, lived on West Carolina Avenue, was a horticultural teacher at Trident Technical College, and he became involved with Lipton in experimenting the moving of these plants, and what they ended up doing was moving about 30,000 of these plants from Somerville to the truck farm, which is down on Highway 17 South going towards Savannah. There was a federal government, U.S. Department of Agriculture, truck farm there. And they moved them down there to see if they'd survive in that environment, which they did. And then, the Lipton Tea Company, bought 127 acre tract of land on Watermelon and moved them to that for their final location. So what happened, all these tea plants interpollinated and whatnot, and so all the individual varieties that exist in Summerville were all mixed together by the time the plants were down at Watermelon. So they sell a blend of tea down there today if you go down there. But that's Mac and his wife and his two daughters and some of the plants at Watermelon. So the other part of this story has to do with the rest of the 600 acres we were talking about being part of the tea farm. I only said that I knew about 70 acres. What happened to the rest of it? Well, it got sold off to create the Summerville Country Club, basically. So back in 1925, a gentleman by the name of Frederick Poole Smith from Detroit spent different seasons down here at the Pine Forest Inn, loved the area, decided he wanted to build his own resort here in Somerville. So this is what it looked like. But this is not a picture of it. Could never find a picture of Frederick Smith. This is his twin brother. They said they were identical twins, but who knows? But anyway, Frederick Smith had been working with Timothy Kemp, to build another series of golf courses up in Michigan. Maurice Kemp, excuse me. Tim is the son, but that's the father, Maurice. Maurice was a civil engineer, came from Brussels, migrated to Canada, was up there laying off different towns and whatnot in western Canada, and met Frederick Smith at some point, and Frederick hired him to help with a couple of golf course projects that he had going on up there. So when Frederick got interested in Somerville, he brought Maurice down here, and Maurice designed the first layout for it, and the area that they were looking at was 1,000 acres. So let's examine that for a minute. The land here is South Main Street right here. Here's where the tea farm is that I knew. This over here is the current country club in here. So Country Club Boulevard comes off right here in this area. Mary Street and Pinecrest across the street were part of that property where they're gonna have polo grounds and whatnot. So this is the 600 acres in here that Dr. Shepherd had down to this point. And Frederick Smith went and bought another 400 acres going out. He had 1,000 acres, but he put all of his property together. They went all the way down to Woodland Estates. You know, a subdivision on Bacon Bridge Road. Bacon Bridge Road is here. Woodland Estates is this subdivision in here. Did not include that, but included everything around that, including Newington. This is Newington School is over here. Salisbury Acres is over here. So all that area in there was to be for the Somerville Club. And then we had the Florida thing, and the Depression came, and so we didn't get the whole thing built. But this is amazing right here, because this was when the clubhouse at the country club was built. And if you notice the columns and all, the facade of that building hadn't changed one bit in 100 years. And by the way, we're talking about when they started building on this, 1924. The Somerville Country Club just had its 100th anniversary last year. So that's why they wanted us to hurry up and finish this book for them, so they could have it for the occasion. So this right here was the Holly Inn that was recently torn down also. That was supposed to be the residence place for the people that attended the Summerville Club. That was the name of it, the Summerville Club. And so this was the hotel to accommodate it. These are the workers that were doing the plumbing work. I just happened to find this old picture in a trade magazine, 1927 trade magazine. It had the Pine Forest Inn in there, but I had to take the workers with it, yeah.
Where was that inn?
Uh,
Where was that inn? The Holly Inn?
If you, on this side of Country Club Boulevard, about 1 or 2 roads off on the left is a Holly Lane.
Yeah.
So if you, Holly Inn was at the end of Holly Lane. And this right here was the Candlelight Inn, which is off of Country Club Boulevard on the left side just before you get to the parking lot at the golf course. It's still there, it's been changed and whatnot, but that was the restaurant for the Summerville Club. And over the years, we were just talking about the Depression and whatnot, the operation of it fell on hard times. And to make a long story short, one of Frederick Smith's associates in Michigan, Truman Newberry, ended up owning the Summerville Club along with his brother in 1934. Truman was the Secretary of the Navy under Teddy Roosevelt, and he ran for Senate to represent Michigan and won the seat and started serving. And then he got sued by his opponent, Henry Ford. Henry Ford claimed that he had outspent the allowable limits on the law and took him to court, and the court convicted him of violating the election laws in Michigan. And Truman took it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, well, he had spent a lot of money, but he didn't pass the threshold. So they threw out the conviction, and Truman decided, you know, he'd had enough of public life, so he went back to his private activities, which were plenty, because he was involved with a number of different industries and whatnot. Packard Motor Company, just to name one, very much involved with those. So you say, well, how does all of our work that we put into creating this history affect what's going on? And in the Charleston Mercury newspaper, any of y'all get the Charleston Mercury? Yeah, right. Look into that. They got pretty good stuff in there. The Mercury took a look at all the stuff we put in there and said that they come to the conclusion that back in the day, the people, the citizens of Summerville, spent a lot of time trying to promote their hometown. And which is amazing, because that was back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. That they were busy doing that. And that's what we're trying to do today. I believe you got your Chamber of Commerce, you've got a lot of activities going on, but we have lost a lot of the drawing cards that were there back when they were talking about this. So what were some of the attractions during Summerville's golden age? I had no idea, so I looked at one of the pamphlets that the Pine Forest Inn had put out to the general public, telling people to please come to Summerville. Well, they had 8 things they talked about. One was the long history Summerville had going back to colonial times. Second thing was a healthy environment among the pine trees. Third thing was good transportation connected by rail. I mean, the lifeblood of Summerville was the railroad. It was the one that connected us to the city and also the rest of the world. And without the railroad, we'd just been another town. Number of amenities that Summerville had, with a variety of churches, good schools and whatnot. That was a calling card for people to come visit. And item 5, it said Summerville, Charleston, and Sullivan's Island, although an hour from each other, offer 3 different and distinct phases of climate. Well, I don't know if I could discern any differential in the climate between Summerville, Charleston, and Sullivan's Island, but they were apparently making those comparisons. Item 6, natural beauty of Summerville with all of the plants that we had and the bushes that provided beautiful blooms. Also, we had area interest with Milton Gardens, Magnolia Gardens and whatnot that tourists could enjoy. Item 7, I'm gonna leave to Dr. West, but they claimed if you came to Summerville, plans of nervousness and insomnia used quickly to the beneficial influence of the pond-laden atmosphere. Now, I'm not gonna touch that one, so.
Knock it if you will, but that's why I moved here. I'm not near as nervous as I used to be.
Okay. And item 8, entertainment and amusement activities. They had local orchestra, golf, and all kinds of activities to interest people if they want to come visit here. And of course, they had all the testimonials of people that have been here and how wonderful it was. So, what are some of the things that we might look at that are unique to Summerville? One of them, and I know the museum does a good job promoting this, but Summerville was the first railroad town in the United States. In the whole country, there were lots of railroad towns all through the West, Midwest. But what constitutes a railroad town? Well, the government knew that in order to promote rails for expanding, that they had to give them land. They had to have a place to put the track. They also had to have land to grow trees on, because back in that day, you needed fuel, and the fuel was the tree, pine tree in this area. And so you had to have a place to grow trees. You also needed areas that you could impound to create places where you could accumulate water, because the engine ran on steam, and you needed to refill the tenders with water periodically. So the need for land was quite obvious back in those days. And then the railroads could sell the land, which they did in Summerville. This is where New Summerville came from. Where we are right now was the first layout by the Detmold plan in 1832, where the railroad sold lots here to have cash to go buy locomotives, buy rolling stock, buy iron rail, and also to promote what they were doing. So that's one thing. The only reason why I know about that is because I read about it in the history of the Southern Railroad. They even say it. Another thing that Summerville had was a lot of notable people coming to Summerville. We had 2 presidents, Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. We had first ladies that came, government officials. Baroness de Graffenried lived here. Robert Parsons, he was a railroad baron that built what you all now know as Gaston Manor, that big house out on the west side of Summerville. Florence Nightingale Graham, that was her baptized name, but we all knew as Elizabeth Arden. And Bernard Kendrick, a mystery writer, just to give you some examples of people that lived in Summerville over the years. Also, Summerville had its input in the 1902 exposition with all the main players living right here in Summerville and being neighbors. This one's kind of interesting. Lynn Hood, who lived at the tea farm, and her husband, John Morant, owned some place that some of y'all might know, the Gaslight Cafe in Greenwich Village back in the 60s. That was where Bob Dylan hung out, and Flip Wilson, all them trying to hone their skills. But the lady that owned that place lived at the tea farm for a number of years. Her father was Clarence Hood, who came here from Mississippi. He was in the wood business, and he built a $500,000 mill at the end of Richardson Avenue. So when you head towards Lincolnville and run out of street, you got to take a hard left and then another hard right. That's his mill that he built back in 1948. And the reason why he came to Summerville with his daughter was Lynn, and she grew up in Summerville while they were here until about 1953. But you wouldn't have thought that we had some hippie connections here in Summerville that stretch back that far. Also, many people didn't know about the azalea cultivars that we have that can trace their origins through Florida. And the Summerville Country Club has a sister institution in Troy, New York, Michigan, excuse me, Sylvan Glen Golf Club up there, and they just had their 100th anniversary about 3 years ago, a couple of years before. They practiced on that one up here before they came to Summerville, but perfected it at the Summerville Club. But I started off telling you about, the sweet tea thing and the dilemma that we have with Peter Stuyvesant and his honey. And I do have a suggestion for the town to rectify that situation, because I know lots of times the newspaper will ask the town, well, how can you say that Summerville's the birthplace of sweet tea? Well, I'll leave you with that thought. Anybody have any questions?
Is there a way to get any of those, like the Pride of Summerville, those azaleas, does anybody still sell them?
I don't know.
I mean, to me, I want to go back to Florida, get us back our azaleas.
Well, where did the azaleas from Summerville come from? I thought most of the azaleas came in through Middleton Place.
That's what I thought too.
Well, they did. But a lot of them came from there, and that's all. Middleton and Magnolia.
Which came from the West Indies, right?
But then also oh boy, I got 2 brown thumbs. Anything I touch on a plant dies. And you're asking me about this stuff. The book has got a wonderful appendix on all the plants, and it's got the origins in there, and I forgot right off the bat, but there was Berkman's back in 1880 he was from Belgium. He used to import all kinds of camellias and I guess azaleas and whatnot, and Dr. Shepherd was a friend of his because of the fertilizer activities. They would get together and talk about ways to fertilize plants better for growing and all that stuff. But I wish I could answer that more definitively, but I might be lying to you if I told you something. So I'm not gonna make something up. But check the back of the appendix. It's got a lot of information about the history of the plants, and that's where Lisa came in, because she's the one that helped us put that together, and we just made sure that the periods were where they're supposed to be and whatnot. So yes, ma'am.
I think really what you said, it was the cultivar. It wasn't the azalea, it was the cultivar of that azalea that's so popular, which is a
Yes,
very different thing. The
Right.
Pride of Summerville.
Right.
But my question is, where did Shepherd get the tea plants from?
That's what I wanted
Well,
to know too.
Shepherd got, that's a good question. He got tea plants from Middleton and Magnolia. He got, Middleton was where.
Camellia, japonicas. They had
Yeah.
japonicas, but not sinensis.
They had both of them, because Andre Michaud brought them to Michaud Boulevard, and he got some from over there, but he also got tea plants from China, because throughout the years, the federal government, the attachés that we'd have representing the country in China would bring back tea seeds and whatnot, and Dr. Shepherd would end up with them, experimenting with them. So that's how he got oolong tea and some of these different categories that they had categorized over here, but now all that's mixed together down in Guatemala.
But do you think the people that live on the tea farm, their plants are original?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So maybe they have some,
Yeah, but you don't know if that,
yeah.
I don't know.
Cross-pollinate.
You're talking to the wrong person. I'm an engineer.
You're doing great, Tom.
Yes, yes.
I don't know, I wish I could answer it more. If my father was here and my grandfather, they could certainly tell you what you want to hear.
Are the copies of your book at Timrod, are they signed copies?